From Beyond Marketing, it's the 20-Minute Call, a podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, check out the 20-Minute Call hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today is one of the most respected and accomplished figures in skydiving, both as an athlete and as an artist. Bruno Brokken, originally from Belgium, has dedicated more than 4 decades to the sport, amassing somewhere around 30,000 jumps and a reputation as one of the most skilled aerial photographers and videographers in the world. His work has captured the essence of skydiving, from world records to exotic boogies, and even high-profile commercial projects for brands like Coca-Cola, Armani, and Xbox. Bruno began his skydiving journey in 1980 at the age of 17 and quickly fell in love with the sport. And moving to Skydive Empuriabrava in 1987, he became one of Europe's earliest AFF instructors, a tandem master, and a professional camera flyer. Bruno's career highlights include filming numerous world records, such as the historic 400-way formation skydives in Thailand and the 100-way canopy formation world record in the US. He's also a 2-time freestyle world champion videographer and has earned accolades in canopy piloting, including European champion in 2005. Over the years, Bruno's passion for skydiving has taken him to breathtaking locations worldwide, documenting iconic moments and pushing the boundaries of aerial photography. His contributions to the sport were formally recognized in 2020 when he was inducted into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame. From his early days as a musician funding jumps to becoming a global skydiving ambassador, Bruno's story is one of creativity, resilience, and boundless passion. I'm thrilled to welcome Bruno Brokken to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Hello, Bruno.
Hi, James.
That's a pretty good resume. I like it. That's a good CV.
Thank you.
How do you feel when you hear someone read it back to you?
Well, it's been a good run so far. So I had a lot of fun skydiving, a lot of adventure, a lot of friends, and I hope I can keep going for a few years more.
I said to you before we started recording that you are so youthful. And I think you thought, well, are you saying that I'm old? And what I'm saying is you've been doing this for 44 years, and your passion, your enthusiasm, you're still on the scene. You're still, your name is still showing up in all the magazines, and you're on the big records, and you don't seem to be slowing down. Your heart still seems so into the sport. How is that possible?
Well, I somehow still love what I'm doing. It's like, it's skydiving and taking pictures and videos is what I like to do. So I keep going, basically.
Simple like that. You grew up in Belgium. Tell me about your family and your background, and how would you describe your childhood? I'm curious to know about little Bruno and how it was that he became what you became. Is there any insights from growing up in Belgium that would help us see that this would be your path?
No, basically, I think I had a happy childhood. My dad was a military pilot. Yeah, he had a long career in the military. He started actually as one of ground troops in the Korea War in the early 50s. And then when he came back to Belgium, he went to the Air Force and started flying aircraft. So he was the last class actually in Belgium on the Spitfires, and then the early ones on the Meteor Hunters, the jets, the early jets. So and then he went on to fly other aircraft and then helicopters at the end. Yeah, he retired when I was still young. I was about 10 when he retired from the military. So, but I was always interested in aircraft. I always went to air shows, watched the skydives especially. And then once I got the chance, the year before he retired, I got there was a skydiving competition in Belgium, military skydiving in Schaffen. It's a military drop zone in Belgium. And he took me a few flights up with a big H-35 helicopter. So and I really was impressed by people jumping out there. And so, but that was it basically. It didn't come back till later by coincidence, actually, since I started jumping.
Did your father ever get to see how successful, or your parents get to see how successful you became in skydiving?
Well, my mom died in 1988. The second year I was in Empuriabrava. She died of a disease, but she knew that's what I wanted to do by then. She had no problem that I left for Spain. And my dad never said anything about that, but he came sometimes and watch. He also died maybe 10 years ago now. And I think he enjoyed coming and watch here at the drop zone, have a coffee or a beer in the evening and watch the skydiving.
Do you have siblings, brothers or sisters?
I've got two older brothers. None are skydivers.
Do they think their little brother is crazy, or have they accepted your profession?
I don't think they think I'm crazy because they're crazy in their own way.
I think we're all crazy in our own way, for sure. Bruno, a big part of you is you're a musician. How did you get into music? Is that early on?
I don't have anybody in the family that plays music or anything, but I always enjoyed playing keyboard. I had a little electric keyboard when I was a kid, and I always played hours and hours and hours on it. And my parents saw I was like always busy with that, and then for my birthday or something, they bought me a little bigger keyboard, and then I always played for hours and hours, and I enjoyed it.
Were you ever in a band?
Actually, I'm in a band right now with skydivers. We're practicing for the Christmas boogie here in Empuriabrava, but never something serious. You know, it's always good fun and with friends and so.
I read that in your early career, you would play in bars or restaurants to try and make enough money for lift tickets. Is that right?
That's right. When I started jumping when I was 17, and back then there was no jobs at the drop zone like packer or this kind of jobs. So luckily skydiving was cheaper than now. But still, I needed money. I was at school, so I would go play Friday nights, Saturday night in a restaurant, like on the piano, or back then it was popular, these organs. So I played that for a few hours, and I had enough money to do some jumps then the next day.
Very cool. It seems like many have made their way through packing, and few, I think, I've heard stories of music helping them get through their skydiving journey. So
if there was packers back then, I probably would have been packing, I guess. It's easier compared to going in the evening until late, you know.
Bruno, what was the circumstance that led to you making your first skydive?
Well, then I was still in school, and I was in the summer. The best summer job in school for students was a lifesaver. I lived at the sea in Belgium. So we had like 2 months of where we could be lifesavers. I had to do the course, and then I was doing that. I was really well paid for the time, and we had 2 days off a week also. So I did that, and then there was a girl there that was a colleague of mine, and one day she came with a bandage on her knee, and I asked her, "Whoa, what happened?" And she said, "I had a hard landing." I said, "But what?" So with a parachute. I said, "Where?" Here there was a military airport in the town. And then the next week I went to have a look and got some info. And then the week after I went to do first jump course. That's how it started.
Clearly you were hooked from the get.
Yeah, I went for one jump and I did I think a second one the same day. And then that was it. That was all I could think of. And then every weekend I was there at the airport and trying to get on an aircraft.
So somewhere, I should say, I read an article written by you a couple of years ago that you shared about making a helicopter jump maybe a year or two into your skydiving career, where you all were jumping in Speedos, no helmets, no goggles, and you had an off landing.
Well,
can you share that story?
Yeah, that was maybe a few years later, at maybe 300-400 jumps. I'm not sure. And we had this accuracy competition in Bruges, in the city, in the middle of town. It's a pleasure. How do you say? A theme park there with dolphins and so. And we had this accuracy competition there. My friends and me went there not for the accuracy, but just because we wanted to jump from the helicopter. And so it was a hot summer day, so we decided to go in swimming trousers. And then back then the Speedos were in. So we were all in Speedos. And I had a premature opening on exit with my reserve handle behind the door handle. So I ended up with, of course, back then it was round reserves. And I ended up at 5,000 feet over Bruges, the city, with a round reserve and my Speedos. So that was kind of one of my first funny stories.
I also understand that you landed in someone's backyard.
That's right.
And you obviously were very fortunate because not a lot of areas to land. And I think the homeowners were very surprised to see who was in their backyard in their Speedos.
Yes, they didn't want to let me, because I couldn't get out. There was a fence around the house, but they wouldn't let me in the house because there was a weirdo in the garden there. They had no idea I came from with a parachute, So, yes, and then people were looking for me. I think the police was also looking for me. And at the end, it all went well.
What was the connection that got you from Belgium over to Skydive Empuriabrava in 1987, 7 years into jumping?
Well, my first 7 years of skydiving were mainly in Belgium. I only went away for some events. In 1987, I did the Belgian AFF instructor course. In Belgium, it's one of the countries where they've been doing AFF since. Actually, I think the first AFF course was by Mike Johnston in 83 or 84. They were one of the first ones doing AFF in Europe. And I decided to do the course when I had enough jumps. I had about 1,000 jumps. And I did the course in 1987. And then back then I was in a four-way team. And one of my teammates had an fatal accident. And there was really a good friend living in the same town. And we did a lot of jumps together. So it was it hit me quite hard. So I decided to go after the life-saving season. I decided to go to Spain just to change IDs. That was September 87. And then by coincidence, they needed somebody that spoke French for a French student to do the ground school. So I did that. I did some AFF secondary jumps, and then that's how I ended up here. Then they asked me for the next year to come back and maybe also do the tandem license. So I did that, and that was the beginning.
It's very rare for someone to be at one drop zone for so long. I mean, you've been at Empuriabrava, I believe, all the way since 1987. What about Skydive Empuriabrava has allowed you to be happy there for so long?
Well, Skydive Empuriabrava was a center they were way ahead of the rest here in Europe. They had big boogies, they had modern gear. For example, the students had square reserve. Me, for example, as the instructor, I had round reserve in my rig. So that's how advanced they were compared to the rest of Europe. And I really enjoyed it here. It's also a nice area to live. Yeah, that's why I'm still here.
Bruno, you're in the Hall of Fame because of your photography. I know you were more into music than photography. How is it that you became so skilled with a camera? And at what point did people start taking notice of your work?
Well, you become skilled in something by doing it a lot. So when I went to Empuriabrava the first year, I only had my own photo camera. I didn't have a video camera. And but so I was doing kind of everything, AFF, tandem, some photo jumps. And then I also bought my first video recorder or camera at the end of the 88 season, which was still VHS with a record on the chest. And then I started doing more and more of video and photos, and I liked it more than doing AFF and tandem, although we were paid less. So, but I did it a lot. So at the end, every year I did a little bit less of AFF, a little bit less of tandem, and more of photography or video, and then it ended up doing only that, basically.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. Do you recall seeing your first printed magazine, your first picture in a magazine? And how did it make you feel?
Yeah, the first time printed was more for some publicity or promotion for the skydiving center here. With Roland, the old manager, he was using a lot of my pictures for that. And then the first magazine, I think, was the French Paramag, which in 1992 there was an exit shot of my of 150-way world record formation skydiving. So that was my first cover on a bigger magazine, on a skydiving magazine.
And did that give you a drive or hunger to want to see your work on in more, like what motivated you to continue driving for photography?
No, but it was not that much to being on cover of the magazine. It was just that I enjoyed taking pictures and so, and taking different pictures. For example, back then, selfies were not in, or there was not even a word for that. So I experimented with sticks, with cameras on it, with a long remote cable, and so to have different angles and so.
So interesting. I'm curious. I read, Bruno, that in 1990, you saved the life of a British skydiver, a man named George Pilkington, during the Belgian Hercules boogie. Tell me that story.
I was, of course, in Empuriabrava working, doing tandem and FM video, but then I left for the boogie in Belgium, which was from a Hercules, and it was in the middle of the summer, but I could leave for a week. So I went there, and I was filming different formations and all kinds of things. And there was different aircraft flying. There was a Herc, but there was also a Skyvan and I think a Caribou. They had quite a lot of aircraft there. So at one point, somebody came and asked, "Can you come film my 500 jump?" A friend of mine, Charles. So I said, "Yeah, I can, but I'm on the other lot. I tried to make it." So when I arrived at the lot, I was late. I had to kind of run, and I made it just in time. It was a Skyvan. I arrived there, and then to my surprise, they were all naked. 10 of them, 5 guys, five girls. And there was another cameraman called John. So I didn't get much briefing. Just say, "We go diving because they link it, they exit, we both go diving." Okay. We exited, and they tried to link the exit, but of course they have no grip, so it was complicated. And they funneled. And then one of the girls on the load had a premature opening. And she went through the rest of the people, and she hit quite a few people. I came out of my dive, I just saw people everywhere, and some people were you could see they were hit because they were holding their head or something, but one person was really down, far away and spinning. So I went in a dive and got there, and I could see, George was not there. Was like kind of on his belly, but spinning and not looking, not. He was trying to kind of pull with his left hand. It was like strange. And then I just docked on him and pulled his mane out. So yeah, and that was in 1990. So that was Cyprus only started being popular maybe 92. Well, they came out in 91. So there was nobody jumped with the ADs back then.
Incredible. I read that story. I didn't know that everyone was naked. What ended up happening to George? Did he have any paralysis, or did he end up making a full recovery?
He landed. They took him to hospital to a checkup, and he was released the same day. He just was knocked unconscious, and he had no injuries. So there was another guy, Charles, who's 500 jump. He lost some teeth from the impact, and some people had some bruises, but nobody was badly hurt.
How fortunate for George that the camera flyer and you also was a very experienced AFF instructor by then and was heads up enough to really dock and deploy for him. Incredible. so fortunate.
Being an AFF instructor helped for sure, because sometimes we have students that go a little bit out of control, so that for sure helped.
You mentioned the Cypress coming out, and you met Helmut early on when he was developing the Cypress. And am I correct in saying that you sort of helped with some of the process, either test jumping the Cypress, or I'm a bit muddled there. But I know you made some jumps with Helmut early on.
Well, I didn't, not helping really, but Helmut came to Empuriabrava because there was a busy drop zone and a lot of experienced people. So he came there in the late 90s. And I remember this German guy there showing up. I had no idea who he was, what he was doing, but he was asking a lot of questions to all the instructors, to the pilots, to everybody. So that's the first time I met Helmut, and then it's only a few years later I knew what this was all for, you know.
Yeah, I know you made some balloon jumps with Helmut or something early on.
Yes,
if my reading is correct.
Back then there was a Belgian guy here that was doing balloon flights right close to the drop zone. He was from Belgium, so I was kind of his middleman. So I brought people in, made sure they had enough jumps. I think it was 200 jumps back then minimum. And then I made sure I collect the money, and I could keep a little bit for me also. And when it was a slot on the balloon, I could go up. So there was always a slot in the balloon.
Very good. You mentioned earlier on that you had a close friend in Belgium that died on a skydive. And I'm curious, Bruno, when you've been in the sport a long time, you know, in your case, 44 years, you've likely lost a few friends along the way. And I've been in communities where we've lost friends, and inevitably it shakes the community, and we may lose people going, yeah, this reality is very hard, and I'm going to leave the sport. How have you dealt with keeping your love for the sport while probably having lost many friends through the years? How do you juggle that?
Well, I think everybody that's been in the sport for a while knows there's a risk, but that's the same thing if you go on the road. The trick is to try to minimize the risk the most you can. I think the good times in skydiving outweigh the bad times. I lost some people in other things with health or with car accidents. And I believe the sport has become safer than it was when I started, really.
I read you haven't had a cutaway in almost 20,000 jumps.
I had like 6 reserve rides, something like that, from when I started until 1993. And then I had more than 20 years without cutaway. Actually, no, almost 30 years. It would have been 30 years last October, but I had a cutaway on June 2023.
Oh, amazing. What is it in your process? You must be packing for yourself for every load. Is there anything that you do in preparation for a jump that helps you minimize risk, and certainly from having to cut away?
I'm really careful when I pack, and also sometimes I use a packer also, but I always make sure it's always the same person. And if I don't know the person because I'm at an event, I usually go watch the first day of the back. I'm kind of careful. And also the opening is a lot about how you react at the first moment when the canopy comes out. Because sometimes you can save a line twist if you're quick enough, like that. Also, I've been lucky because I've been swooping for a few years, canopy piloting. And normally you usually pull a bit higher than normal for that. Usually you get out at 5,000 feet and pull after 5-6 seconds, so you're quite high. And I had a few openings where I got out of it because I had enough altitude.
Bruno, have you been able to take a step back and reflect on all the changes you've seen in skydiving in the last 40 plus years? I mean, you've seen the evolution. I mean, you were on the part of the early scene of canopy piloting. And now there's, XRW and you flying along Jetman, Yves Rossi. Now we're into angle flying and now even tandem wingsuit. I mean, is it incredible to you? I mean, you're still so part of it all. I think my question is, are you surprised by how quickly the sport is rapidly changing?
Yes, it's amazing. And I think it actually moved a bit slower in the 80s, but then it started speeding up, I would say, in the early 90s with the freestyle, free fly, sky surf, the wingsuits came. And then from the faster canopies, it all went really quick from then on. Because I think I started in 1980 and skydiving had not really changed too much since the 60s, except maybe for, let's say, some like Jerry Bird team and BJ Ward team. But most of the world was doing still the same like they were 30 years before.
Part of the area that you were in on the early days is with Patrick de Gallardon, with his wing, the development of the wingsuit. I mean, he is really sort of the father of that movement. And you made a lot of jumps with him. I never met him. Can you share how it was that you came to meet him and go on some of the expeditions that you did with him?
I met Patrick the first time in early 90s when he came to Empuriabrava to do some filming with the sky surf. And Patrick Paz was his cameraman then, because Patrick Paz, in the US, not many people know that, but he used to be an amazing camera flyer and did quite some videos in the early 90s and late 90s. Crosswinds, the traveling videos, quite amazing videos for the time. So they came here to do some recordings. And that's the first time I met Patrick. And then later, when I got involved with filming freestyle with the Italian freestyle and Marco Mana, we met at competitions because Patrick was doing the sky surf, I was doing the freestyle competitions. And then we jumped together now and then that's it. And then we got some expeditions together.
Here in the US, when I read about someone like Roger Nelson, Roger was so far ahead of his time. And it seems to me that Patrick was very ahead of his time. Well, can you really comment on that in terms of how his brain was thinking so differently than everybody else, particularly on the wingsuit front?
I'm not sure. This is kind of people like Roger, like Yves Rossi, like him. They think further ahead than most people. Most people, they do something and they're happy with what they do. And this kind of people, they look ahead. They have ideas that we think is never going to work, but for them, they show it can work, and it shows.
Extraordinary. You went on an expedition to the North Pole with Patrick, and I recently saw a video of this, and it seems so extreme. And it seems like if there was an expedition, I mean, there are, but that's extreme today. In 2024. I mean, just the logistics of getting there, much less jumping there. And this is now back when, skydiving wasn't quite as sophisticated as it is today. Can you share that story of going to the North Pole with Patrick and what that jump was like?
Okay. Well, there had been already a few expeditions to the North Pole before. Somewhere Bill Booth was involved, and mainly with the Russians. So they had the aircraft available to go there and the helicopters to come back and then more planes to come back. So it's quite a big expedition to go there. And so in 1994, Patrick called me one day, say, hey, you want to come to the North Pole? And I said, to where? Yeah, to the North Pole. And then he gave me a few details and yeah, we're going to do that. And I said, okay, sign me in. So that was it.
You're painting a broad picture here, Bruno, because the video shows it's so cold, right? Bone-chilling cold to the fact that your goggles literally froze over. Were you scared?
No, not really. Of course, you're nervous and you concentrate, because I also had a lot of things to think of. I had a video camera, I had 2 photo cameras, and they were all wrapped in with these chemical heaters because to keep them a little bit warm. And then the cables because back then we didn't have blow switches also. I had a cable with a photo release in my hand. It had to be protected because otherwise it would get brittle and break with the cold. So I had so many things to worry about. And Patrick, the same thing with his sky surf. So we were more concentrated than nervous or scared, I would say.
For those listening, that jump was Patrick was wearing. He was jumping on a skyboard, sky surfing, and yeah, it looked miserable. It was beautiful, the picture that you took of him and the video, but it looked quite miserable.
So yeah, what happened on that jump is,
in terms of how cold.
Of course, Patrick we jumped from a big plane, a big cargo jet. It's called Eoshin 76. So with the sky surf, he cannot run around in the plane. So he was hopping along. I was trying to help him. And then he had a seat close to the door. And back then, the helmets were not like today. We didn't have this helmet that you can just buy off the shelf and work. He had a prototype full-face helmet with a visor that he had to close on both sides. And somehow he didn't get to close it with his gloves. And on the video, you can also see there's a security guy that was supposed to jump completely last to check if everybody makes it back to the landing area, because there's also cracks where sometimes you land on the other side, you cannot make it back in the ice, So you have to be careful with that. So, and he can see he's there, and suddenly it takes too long for him. Of course, we're flying 130 knots, and suddenly he leaves without us. And we were last in the plane. And finally, he managed to kind of close the visor, but as soon as we went out at this high speed, it opened up again. So he had his visor open all the time in free fall.
Bruno, you seem so like easygoing. If someone asked me about the North Pole, I would say, "Oh, it was so cold, it was so dangerous." You were like, "Yeah, we went and we did that thing, and it was good." Is this how you always are? You seem so very relaxed and chill. Does your heart rate ever do you ever get scared on any of the expeditions you've been on? Because that would make me, in that environment, very uncertain.
Oh, wow. Maybe I don't look nervous outside, but maybe I'm nervous inside. I don't know. But somehow under pressure, I seem to be able to do, my job. Because at the end, there was one jump off with no way to repeat. And there was a lot of money involved to get there. But yeah, then you just get the job done and fly back.
If you're a fan of the 20-Minute Call, I'd like to invite you to be a member of a budding community with me on Patreon. By becoming a patron of the show, you can join me behind the scenes to discuss options for future guests and gain access to some show swag. It's pretty sweet. Details on how to become a patron can be found in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. One of the projects you've been very involved with, as we've mentioned his name a couple of times, is Yves Rossi with the Jetman. And essentially, for those unfamiliar with Jetman, is Yves has essentially engines on a fixed wing. I suppose it's probably carbon graphite these days. That literally has him flying across the sky. And I know you've captured a lot of photography, video of him, have helped make sure that the basics are being covered while he's thinking about everything else, that his gear is what it needs to be. Tell me about that relationship with Yves and about that project. It's so extraordinary.
Okay, well, I met Yves the first time when he showed up in Empuriabrava in the early 90s, maybe 91, 2, around there. And he was a young skydiver. He had he had less than 200 jumps, and he wanted to sky surf. And back then the rule was 200 jumps before you could try. And you had to be able to stand up in free fall. But he looked like a heads-up guy, and he was a jet fighter pilot. And so we went up with him, and he did some stand-ups and so on. And he was really amazing for the number of jumps he had. And so we say, okay, you can sky surf with a little board. So he went there and then started sky surfing and got better and better, and then, got bigger boards. And then he even went to some competitions, I think in Eloy in 94. And then he started experimenting with skysurfs with some profile to glide more. And also they were like a wing sideways. And but after a few times he said, I've got too much resistance with my body, so I'm gonna put them on my back. So that's how it started, with a wing on his back. And first they were quite small, and then they went bigger and bigger. And then suddenly where he really had an amazing glide angle with his wings. And that was probably early 2000 by then. And then he came up with the idea, I'm going to attach some jet engines to it. So he started with 2 jets. And then at the beginning, he could barely hold the altitude with 2 jets. Also, the wing was not really high-tech. It was not perfect. But then he kept developing it. And Yves always did everything with his own money. He was not sponsored back then. And that cost so much money for making the wing, getting the jet engines, and so. But he kept going, and a lot of times he would come to Empuriabrava and he would just have to cut away the wing and break everything, and then go back home, come back 6 months later with a new wing. And a little bit by a little bit, and then he started working, and suddenly he had a better wing, and then he put 4 engines on it, and then I think the big breakthrough was when he crossed the English Channel from France to England. I think that was back in 2007, I think, or 8, I'm not sure. And that was a big breakthrough with National Geographic filming and so on. Yeah, and then he went all uphill from there.
It's amazing how ahead of his time he was, because that's still incredible today with the footage. Is the Jetman project still going, or is it now concluded? Is it finished?
Yves had 2 guys that came in the Jetman project, which was Fred and Vince, which were probably the best skydivers in the world, free fly, world champions, swoopers, everything, and they really brought a lot to the project, like flying wise. The whole project went to Dubai, and then they kind of had a little issues there, and Yves went back to Switzerland, and that's when the accident happened with Vince. That's maybe 6 years ago. Basically, since then, the Jetman project is kind of stalled a bit. I don't think too much has happened since then.
Did you do a project in the Grand Canyon with Yves with the Jetman?
Yes, that was the first time Yves flew in the US. That was, I believe, 2012. The funny story with this is we had to get permission from the FAA. So they wanted to put Yves in a category, and they couldn't find a category to put him in, because Yves said, I land as a skydiver. Yeah, but you have a wing, you're an aircraft. So, and they wouldn't accept that he was a skydiver. They wouldn't accept him as a ultralight for some reason, or microlight. So then the only way they would accept that he flies in the US was to be in the category of experimental aircraft. So that took forever to do. And then Yves, luckily he had an American pilot license, but it was not current. So he had to go to touch and goes with a 25 years old instructor somewhere to get his American license. And the guy back then was a Airbus commercial pilot and jet pilot. So it was kind of funny, the whole story. And finally he got authorization to fly, but it was really the last day, and he was a kind of a mess with the press was there, but he was not ready to fly, basically. So he flew the next day when there was nobody around.
Tell me about that experience from your standpoint. I mean, what is it like to fly over the Grand Canyon or jump over the Grand Canyon, and I suppose land in the Grand Canyon?
The reason I was there for Yves is to take images, but mainly for safety, because Yves is busy with a lot of things with the wing, with the press there, and all other things. So I was basically making sure the simple part was covered, like that the rig is properly on, everything is attached, altitude, the winds, So my job was on the Grand Canyon jump was to go look for a landing area at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And also the day of the flight, I was supposed to jump a little bit before him, just go check the winds, which was just amazing. I mean, I was on my own there early at sunrise at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It was just crazy. It was just amazing.
And did you end up jumping into the Grand Canyon yourself as well?
Yeah. I did like probably 5 jumps in the Grand Canyon. Some with Eve, without a wing, just to try the landing area and see how the winds are. Yeah, probably 5. I guess 5. I need to check, but about 5 I did.
Gosh, that I can't even imagine how beautiful that must have been under canopy.
Now, it is just one of the best view ever, because it's like 5,000 foot deep, and it's just crazy. I mean, it's so big. It's amazing, just amazing.
Speaking of amazing, you also have been jumping in recent years over the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Anything you'd like to share about that experience? Because the photography that you have shared from those jumps is extraordinary.
The pyramids in Giza, in Cairo, it's an amazing place to jump. And I find it still crazy that it's allowed to jump there, because it's archaeological place. I mean, it's a lot of tourists around, and we can jump. Literally, we land at the foot of the big pyramid, which is crazy. And so I went there the first time with an event called Fly Like a Pharaoh. I went there in 2018. That was the first event really at the pyramids like that. And since then, I've been trying to go back every time I can, because it's amazing. And I think it's a bit like in the 90s, we used to jump in Titusville when the space shuttles were going up. And it was kind of almost normal to do that. And at one day it stopped, especially after 9/11. And now it's like, wow, you guys jumped there? And I think the same maybe one day will happen with the pyramid. So I try to go every time they go to jump there.
Oh, amazing. The photography you've taken there is extraordinary. You've also jumped in another natural wonder of the world, I suppose, which is the Blue Hole.
Yes.
I think you've jumped there at least 8 or 9 times. Is that right?
8 times.
8 times.
That was maybe around 2009 or 10. I saw some picture in the parachutist about the blue people jumping in the Blue Hole, and they were writing that's a water jump. And then I contacted Rich Grimm, which was organizing the boogies there. I told him I want to jump there. So he said, well, come over, and then there's a boogie. You can film a bit at the boogie, and that's it. We went over there, jumped in the Blue Hole, and then went a few times back. And it's just also the view from there is amazing. You have to be there.
When I interviewed Rich for this podcast, one thing that I didn't know was how far away the Blue Hole is from shore. Like, it's a long flight out into the ocean, 50 odd miles offshore, I believe. It's quite a ways.
Yes, the Blue Hole is like 50 miles from San Pedro, which is the main island. And there's a few tiny islands not so far away, just a few miles away, but there's no there's no people living there. But around the Blue Hole, there's no land. What looks like lands from the top is just coral reefs. The Blue Hole itself is like 500 feet deep. Of course, around there is not so deep. It's maybe 20 foot deep or something. And it's just an amazing place to jump.
Of course. I mean, again, your photography is amazing in seeing how beautiful it is. What struck me about those jumps is Rich explaining the logistics and the fear, because if something goes wrong 50 miles away from land with not much around, I mean, it just seems like if something could go wrong, it would really go wrong out there. It seems that you've been very fortunate. Mainly,
you have to avoid landing on the reefs, on the coral reefs. You have to land. If you land in the water into the wind, you should be safe, really. And everybody's got life jackets with them, so it's impressive, but it's not really dangerous, I would say.
Tell me, Bruno, what do you do outside of skydiving and playing music? What are your hobbies?
I have a motorbike. I like to go with friends. Like yesterday, we went to the mountains to have a lunch with a whole bunch of friends, mainly skydivers. And then I like that. And then that's it. That's enough. All these things together take time.
Do you do a lot of reading or listening to podcasts?
Not too much. Huh? Not really. The reading, I can only read really when something really interests me. Otherwise, I kind of get bored.
So what does a typical day look like for you?
Probably going to the drop zone, jump, have a beer, go back home, play a little bit on the piano, sleep. that would be the normal day.
That sounds like a pretty good life, Bruno. So what time of the day do you get up in the morning before you go to the drop zone?
Usually I get up around 8. If my dogs don't wake me up before that.
Bruno, what advice would you give to someone that's listening and desires to be named amongst the Bruno Brokkens and the Craig O'Briens and the Norman Kents and the Gustavos into this realm, if they really want to elevate themselves? What advice do you give to them?
Well, I don't think this is only to skydiving. This is for everything. Just if you like something, put a lot of energy in it and try to get better at it, and that's it. But that's not only photography or skydiving.
One thing that I am always curious about, Bruno, is in life, sometimes we might make a decision that seems small at the time, but that small decision changes our life. Or you meet someone very coincidentally, and then that person ends up being a huge influence for the course of your life. When you think back through your career, was there a moment that had you not said yes to it, or maybe a person had you not met, that maybe we're not talking today and you're not in the Hall of Fame today because of that decision or that person? Can you identify that moment?
Yes, probably I would say to start jumping, because that's what got me to Spain. That's what basically shaped what I'm doing. So that would be my first instructor, Michel, he was running the little club with the little Cessna 172. We only had, I think we could go to 4,000 feet max or something. So, but because of that, I don't think I would have started skydiving, because that was in my hometown. And that's how it started.
Bruno, in life, you can't really achieve high things by yourself. You usually have to have a support team around you or people that believe in what it is that you're doing. Who have those people been to you in your career and life?
Well, I think it started with my parents not trying to stop me when I started jumping, because back then it was kind of known it was a little bit dangerous. And so my dad didn't try to stop me because he couldn't. He did his own share of risky stuff. And my mom, she knew I really liked that, so she didn't stop me or try to stop me. And then later I had my instructor in the little club there where I was jumping, Michel van Beers. He helped me a lot in the beginning because I was not one of his best students, I guess, when I started. Yeah, then later I had a guy that lived in the same town. I was on the Belgian four-way team, relative work, like it was called back then. And he had 1,000 jumps, so I looked up to him. I thought it was amazing, 1,000 jumps. And he was already doing competition, and he was going to the US, and it was quite amazing. Anyway, then later in skydiving, when I arrived in Empuriabrava, I had Roland Hilfiger and Mitch Dakota. They helped me when I started doing AFF there, because I was a new instructor, so they had a lot of experience. They kind of helped me. And then also when I was starting to do camera, I looked up to people that were doing the stuff back then, like Norman Kent and Tom Sanders, and Europe we had Patrick Paas and Max Zaretta. Of course, they had the pioneers before that. There's like Carl Burnish and Ray Cottingham, and I looked up to all those people. But then also later on, I say my wife, but we're not married, but we've been together for over 30 years, Gabby. She influenced me a lot. So also, especially like not take things too seriously when you have problems. And yeah, Gabby was also a skydiver. She did like 7,000 jumps. She stopped maybe 10, 12 years ago. But for example, she was also doing video on the 400 way. So she was really quite experienced. I know she stopped, but she still doesn't, influence me. She comes with me to the boogies and in Costa Rica, and so even if she doesn't jump, and she's always kind of positive, whatever happens, and yeah, she influenced me a lot.
Wow, having a partner for 30 years, that's really extraordinary. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Why you get less for murder? It's a Belgian humor.
This podcast is sponsored by Beyond Marketing, the digital marketing agency for the skydiving industry. Now, I'm not a fan of lots of ads during a podcast. I mean, who likes ads? So I'll stop talking about how marvelously wonderful Beyond Marketing is. But if you're curious about what the amazing people of Beyond Marketing do to help drop zones and manufacturers thrive, then you should check out their website at dropzone.marketing. That's dropzone.marketing. If you're traveling and someone meets you, they never heard of Bruno Brokken, know nothing about skydiving, and you've got your phone with all your photos of all the things you've seen. You've been on the 400 way. You've been on countless world records. You've traveled the world. You've jumped in over Dubai, the Palm. The Blue Hole. All the things you've done. What photos would you show them that you feel you're most proud of?
I would show, I don't know. I can only choose one?
I'll let you have two.
I don't know. Because for some people, some things are important. For other people, other things are important. For some people, the 400 way is something incredible. For other people, that doesn't mean anything. And for other people, jumping over the North Pole means a lot. So I don't know. This is like a lot of different stuff, Depends what people are interested in.
It's like asking who your favorite child is. Bruno, though, here's what I want to extract from you is you don't seem to be, when I read your resume, your CV, you don't sound overly, I'm more impressed by you than you're impressed by you. Your ego is not very big. I mean, everyone has an ego, I think, but, you're just pretty laid back. Is there anything from your career where you go, wow, I can't believe I did that, or that really was an amazing thing when you think back on it? I mean, I don't know how you think about it, because you have accomplished so much. And I think that if I am not the person and others going, wow, look at this body of work that Bruno has done, it would be hard for us to get it out of you, because you're like, yeah, it's been good. So when you reflect on it, on all the things you've done, are you amazed at any of a couple of things that you've achieved?
Well, there's one thing, for example, like to go back to Yves Rossi with the Jetman project. Many years ago, I had the idea to take pictures with the Airbus 380, which is the biggest passenger jet, and he's like the smallest 4-engine aircraft with his little wing. So we got to Toulouse, to the factory, and we managed to take pictures on top of a 380. And then Yves got to speak with one of the test pilots there. It's a long time ago. And then they were speaking about flying formation. And then back then, Yves' wing was not so good. And I think the slowest the 380 can fly with full flaps and empty was probably 115 knots. And Yves could not do that at that time. So, but a few years later, back 2015 or so, Yves was in Dubai. He called me. He said, "What are you doing in October?" I said, "I don't know. Why?" He said, "Come over. We're going to fly with the 380. So then he did a few flights with the information together with Vince with the 380. And I remember going there in the morning and taking off with the 380. And I say, wow, I'm making a 380 taking off here, which was kind of crazy.
Crazy. Now, I believe that was next to an Emirates aircraft, if I'm not mistaken.
It was an Emirates,
it's huge.
Emirates 380 is the biggest passenger in the world. I think they normally have 550 people on board. And it's a double-decker. It's the biggest passenger aircraft in the world. So it is huge. And I got quite a funny story with that, because we were only 6 on board, including the pilot, on one of the flights, and on the first flight. And then there was a flight attendant, stewardess, and she showed up the last moment, and she says, "We're filming a commercial here, but what do we do?" And I asked her, have you heard of the Jetman? And she goes, "No." And then she tried to get out of me what that was. I said, "No, you'll see in half an hour. So, and when they both showed up next to the 380, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was like, for her, she thought she was crazy. That was crazy moment.
Just amazing. What a career you've had, Bruno.
Well, I've been lucky to meet all these amazing people. Because of Eve, I've met so many people. I've even met some moonwalkers, 2 of them, because of Eve. And also with Patrick going to the North Pole, and it's basically luck to be around at the right time, I guess. Also with the exotic boogies with Alexis Perry and then Herman Landsman and later Rich Grimm, BJ Warrett. It's just the people that make it,
Yeah, it's always the community of skydiving that makes it so special. You were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2020. And, when we look at who's in the Hall of Fame, it's Norman Kent and Gustavo and, of course, yourself and people like Roger Nelson and BJ Worth. And, the who's who of skydiving. What does it mean to you to be part of that group?
Well, it means that I finally got to meet a lot of these people. And it was just amazing, Like I said before, I don't think it changed anything for me. It was just it's nice to be recognized, and it's nice to meet all these people. And yeah, day by day, it's the same thing.
You and I have many mutual friends, and when people refer to you, you're always consistent. You're from what I've heard, Bruno is the same great guy that shows up at the drop zone every day, giving his all, whether it's shooting a tandem or shooting a world record. You're never too high. You're never too low. You're consistent and consistently great. And to say that your accolades or you've accomplished so much, clearly it has not changed you as a person. And I just want to express my appreciation for you being a great ambassador and example. This is how it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you. But just like everybody, I make a lot of mistakes also. The trick is to keep going also after mistakes. Not let mistakes take you down.
I think that's a perfect spot for us to end it. Thank you so much, Bruno. It's been an honor getting to know a little bit more about you today.
It was a pleasure, James. See you soon.
See you soon. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Please do follow us on your podcast app so you always have the latest episode, which is released every Monday. If you want to contact the team, our email address is podcast@beyondmarketing.xyz. This episode was edited and engineered by Garnet Znydrick of the YouTube channel Blue Skies Fun Days. Thanks for listening, and join us next week for our next episode.